Have you ever thought that Divergent would be so much better if every time main characters are having a serious conversation, they would just start taking their clothes off? You have? Maybe you haven't. Well, either way, this book fills exactly that niche. Now, before I jump into everything that I thought was wrong with this book, and there's going to be quite a few points, I would like to point out two things that I did actually enjoy. Now, first of all, I thought the pacing was actually done pretty well. I wasn't bored reading the book. I didn't struggle to get through it. It was a pretty quick read for me. I wasn't struggling to pick it up and to put it down. So, in terms of the pacing, I thought it was pretty dynamic and it was pretty entertaining to read. And as a second positive, I would probably like to point out that I quite enjoyed the ending. It was a fairly satisfying wrap up of the story. It does sort of end on a bit of a cliffhanger, but you wouldn't feel like you absolutely have to read the next book. It kind of gives you the choice of either stopping on the first one or continuing further with the story. If you want to stop on the first one, I think it would be satisfying enough to just finish with one book and not continue with the series. So, in that sense, I did quite enjoy the ending, and I thought the wrap up of it was quite interesting. And now, on to the things that I didn't enjoy. And it all starts with the author. So, in case you're not aware, Silver Elite was written by Dani Francis, and Dani Francis is a pen name. Now, nobody knows who the author is apart from obviously the publisher and the publishing house. They haven't said much. They have said that the author is Canadian and that the author is New York Times bestseller. And as you can imagine, these little breadcrumbs led people on a wild goose chase trying to figure out who Dani Francis is. And during that wild internet investigation, we have had plenty of theories. There's been theories about the author being problematic and therefore hiding their identity. There's been theories about it being written by AI and publisher just hiding that fact. But overall, people are speculating and picking up other books from the publisher, trying to find different parallels, looking at the teams that the author has been working with and trying to find other books that the same teams have worked on, looking at structures of books, the general language, sort of the fantasy magic system and kind of how the book is written, maybe the structures of sentences, the structures of paragraphs, and people are desperately trying to figure out who Dani Francis is. And that, in my opinion, isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a very smart marketing strategy. They've created this mysterious author who everybody now wants to know real identity of, and the internet has been incredibly curious. So naturally, the sales of this book and other books by the publisher have, I would assume, significantly gone up from people trying to draw parallels between this book and others. But the part that I find quite amusing and a little bit funny is the group of people who have become sort of the author's protectors. They go on the videos and write comments of how everybody should leave the author alone and let them come out when they feel it's time, almost as if the author has taken a pen name for security reasons or privacy reasons, and almost like the author is desperately trying to hide their identity. And I do wonder if maybe it's just not quite obvious to some people that the use of a pen name and the entire story around who Dani Francis actually is a beautiful and wonderfully crafted marketing technique where every single video, every single reel, every single Reddit thread is just adding to the success of that marketing campaign and effectively raising their sales. This doesn't strike me as a story of an author truly wanting privacy and truly wanting their identity hidden, because I am pretty certain that if they genuinely wanted to stay hidden, they would. Now, with that little rant out of the way, I would like to move on to the book and the bits that I didn't enjoy about the book, because there's quite a bit to add. So, to start off with, and that was truly one of the most annoying parts for me, is the fact that sex seems to be a solution to every single situation, no matter how dire. She just gone through a very traumatic experience and killed somebody? That's absolutely fine. They can have sex and it's all gonna go away. One of her friends just died? Not a problem. He can get naked and it's all gonna go away. They're having a very deep emotional conversation? Well, if you get naked, that conversation is just gonna get so much easier. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a prude. I understand that sex sells and smut has become pretty much an essential part of romance and romance fantasy books. I don't think there's anything bad in that, to each their own. If that's what you enjoy, that's absolutely cool. And I get that from marketing point of view and sales point of view, including sex in books probably raises sales by a fair bit, but do we really need to include it in every single situation to the point where they can't even go through a full on conversation about even a remotely serious or even a remotely emotional theme without taking their clothes off? And the second most disappointing bit was the fact that the plot twist, the mid story plot twist, at least for me, was incredibly predictable. As I was reading the story unravel, I started thinking that this is most likely how things are going to turn out. And that is partially based on the fact that the story and the characters are incredibly similar to Divergent. So if you're able to draw parallels, you will probably be able to predict what's going to happen fairly easily. And the third one was the love story. Apart from being incredibly cliche and painfully predictable, you also have two male characters that she is not involved with, but is expressing some of the interest towards, and they're expressing some of the interest back. You have the main character who is pretty much a walking red flag with every single issue that you can put on the list. And then you have another guy who's openly showing her affection and interest and is being very honest and open about the fact that he likes her and would be interested in engaging in some sort of relationship. But at the same time, he's serious about the education, he's serious about the purpose of him being there, and he genuinely seems like a nice guy and they become close friends. But naturally, she goes towards the first option, which is pretty much expressing no healthy interest back, which then creates that very toxic relationship dynamic that is quite prevalent in a lot of romance books. And I understand it's quite fun to read about, but I did root for the good guy, and I did really hope that maybe this is going to be the story where she doesn't go the very obvious route and actually goes for a guy who could probably be a significantly better match for her. And the last, but most definitely not least, and probably the most disappointing part for me, was the fact that it was way too divergent. And with that said, I haven't read Divergent. I've seen it a few times, and I do remember the story fairly well. Not to the point where I could recite it to smallest details, but as I was reading Silver Elite, I kept feeling that I am just revisiting Divergent story. Even when it wasn't a 100% overlap, it just felt like I've already seen this. I already know what's going to happen. The characters are too similar, both the main ones and the side characters. The story develops in a very similar way. The world is built in a very similar way. And then halfway through the book and closer to the end, it does almost start to feel a bit like Hunger Games, but not the element of the actual games, but the uprising element of the Hunger Games. The uprising in Silver Elite and the uprising in Hunger Games are incredibly similar, and I get it. I understand that it's really hard to invent something that already exists. And why wouldn't you just take an element that already exists and put it in your book and kind of shape it to fit your story, your style, and your development of the storyline? But I didn't feel like there was much shaping up and adjusting. It kind of felt like she just ripped, she or him, I have no idea of the gender of the author. It felt like they just ripped that element from other books, put it in Silver Elite, caked it all together, and the book came out. And that did feel like pretty lazy and, to be honest, quite bad writing. I did want there to be a little bit more unique personality to this book because it did kind of feel like there could be. There was a lot of space for it to develop. There was a lot of character that could have existed in the book. They could have changed the characters. They could have changed the story to fit a very different style. Instead, it kind of feels a bit like a rip-off with some alterations. So, all in all, my final verdict. It was definitely not the worst book that I've ever read, but nowhere near, not even close to being the best or even up there on the list. I think I've given it 2 stars. I would probably say maybe 2.5. It's okay. It's quite fun. It's quite quick to read, even though it's, I think, over 500 pages. Didn't feel like a long book. Didn't feel like a long story. It's very dynamic. Didn't mind the characters. So if you're definitely looking for something similar to Divergent, then this would 100% be the book to pick up. So if that's something that you crave, absolutely read Silver Elite. You're gonna have a lot of fun. If you're looking for a fun romance fantasy that is easy to read and somewhat engaging, Silver Elite will absolutely fill that spot for you. If you're looking for something new, fresh, not seen before, interesting, maybe opt out. It's definitely not going to be anything that you've never read before or anything that you've ever seen before. So it's up to you. I can't say I recommend it. I can't say I would tell you to stay away from it either. It's sort of to each their own situation. So if you have read it, I would be incredibly curious to hear what you thought of it. Please leave a comment down below. I would love to chat about this one, especially if you have opinions on the marketing technique and the entire mysterious identity of the author. I think that's probably the most fascinating part for me. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.